Hey all, and welcome to Shadow of Space, and we are commenting on another BCP video. This is called Black Caucus Lose Their Minds Over SCOTUS Taking Another Sledgehammer to Democrats with Shock Ruling. This is uploaded May 5th. Yes, this is uploaded May 5th. This is being recorded May 7th, and link is in the description.
For decades, the Democrats have been using racial discrimination to draw these crazily drawn lines to try to protect Democrats. And now those crazy jigsaw puzzle lines
To protect black people.
have been
Not
using
Democrats.
to protect members of the Democrat caucus in Congress can no longer be used. And here's the practical effect of what's going to happen. Because we are going to eliminate using race to draw these congressional lines. It means that, especially in these southern states, we are going to add maybe a dozen more Republicans to the United States Congress. Texas is going to add 5 Republican seats. Florida's going to add 4 Republican seats. There'll be many more in other southern states. And we will finally make those districts look a whole lot more compact. It's time for the Democrats to stop being such hypocrites and finally have everybody across the country to stop using race as a reason to draw congressional lines.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott with Maria on Sunday discussing his state's redistricting efforts while the nationwide debate ramps up. The new Texas map officially passing just last week after the Supreme Court overturned a previous ruling blocking it from being implemented. The decision could add as many as 5 House Republican seats ahead of the midterms.
Boy. So we got to talk about the Supreme Court delivering yet again another devastating blow to Democrats on the topic of gerrymandering and redistricting, because Democrats want to draw racist maps, right? They want to draw race-based congressional districts in order to preserve.
There was some story either today or the other day. I can't remember. I guess it wouldn't be today. I guess it would have been yesterday. Yesterday, the day before. About justices and how there's a lot of hostility.
Democrat power and control. The Supreme Court has weighed in on this and said, no, you can't do this, right? You can't draw race-based maps. And Democrats have been losing their minds. In fact, it's not just Democrats. It's also the liberal Supreme Court justices who agree with Democrats that race-based maps are something that we should be allowing, right? Except they don't really believe that. They don't believe in race-based maps that advantage white people or Republicans. They don't believe in that, right? They just believe in race-based maps that advantage Democrats, right? That is what they actually really believe in. But you have Ketanji Brown Jackson, who has been a complete and total embarrassment when you talk about our Supreme Court, right? We talk about the legitimacy of the court. Democrats always want to boohoo, whine, and cry, claiming that the court is illegitimate, but they only say that because the court disagrees with them, right?
Right. I mean, that's really the only reason that they care, is that the courts side with Donald Trump and the Republicans.
Challenges the legitimacy of the court is that you have a stupid woman on the court that just should not be there, right? She's only there because of DEI, right? Because Joe Biden said that he was going to put a black woman on the court. That's the only reason that she's there, okay? And she has shown time and time again that she's really stupid because even her liberal colleagues are disagreeing with her crazy opinions that tend to align with the crazy opinions of the lower courts that have allowed these cases that should not have gotten to the Supreme Court. They should have been struck down in the lower courts, but they're allowed to get to the Supreme Court because, again, the lower courts seem to be taken over by liberal activist judges who are Trump deranged. And Ketanji Brown Jackson is mad, upset, boo-hoo-wine, and crying that the Supreme Court is basically allowing these lower courts to be overturned before a ruling is actually issued by the Supreme Court, because it's so obvious that the lower courts got it wrong, right? And apparently, again, Ketanji Brown Jackson has a problem with this, right? She is really not happy about the way that the current court is operating.
alongside a fast lane to victory for others. Third and finally, I am very troubled by the institutional costs that the Supreme Court's current stay practices impose on the institution in terms of its relationships with the lower courts and the American people. They are substantial. To start, having a docket that allows the court to routinely interfere with lower court cases while they are in progress disrespects the lower court's authority and withholds the deference appellate courts have traditionally provided regarding fact-bound matters that are within a trial court's expertise. In addition, the court is withholding its own work product by issuing summary orders, further undermining the public's confidence in our judicial colleagues. A one-line stay grant that overturns a lower court's contrary conclusion suggests that the judgment call was so easy that no deliberation or explanation is required. And that suggestion casts aspersions on the tedious work that our colleagues have done to carefully parse the evidence, weigh the various factors, and exercise their considerable equitable discretion.
Yeah, right? Yeah, she's upset that her colleagues on the Supreme Court are essentially overturning these lower court rulings without actually really issuing a judgment because it's so obvious that the lower courts got it wrong. Again, because of their liberal activism, right? Because their Democrat anti-Trump activism that is guiding their opinions rather than adhering to the Constitution, okay? So she also lashed out at her colleagues or the Supreme Court over their latest ruling to allow Louisiana to speed up the process of redistricting. Remember, Louisiana is getting rid of racist districts that Democrats are in support of because they want to preserve Democrat power and control, right?
Kind of rips through
drawing
the
districts
state
based off race. And the Supreme Court just issued a new ruling allowing Louisiana to speed up that process. And Ketanji Brown Jackson is currently losing her mind, right? With a bunch of other black Democrats. We're going to talk about that. And her conservative colleagues on the court are lashing out at Ketanji Brown Jackson for losing her mind over their latest ruling. So without further ado, let's read about this. Conservative Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito raged at his liberal colleagues' baseless and insulting dissent in an unusual ruling that speeds up the timeline of a decision benefiting Republicans. Yeah, so keep in mind, this is from the Daily Beast. So this is written, obviously, from a leftist perspective. Just keep that in mind. Normally, the parties in a Supreme Court case must wait 32 days for a ruling to be certified and sent back to a lower court. But on Monday, the court's conservative justices granted an extraordinary request from Louisiana Republicans, allowing them to immediately take advantage of last week's ruling, gutting the Civil Rights Act as they seek to eliminate the state's 2 majority black congressional districts in time for November's midterm elections. In her dissent, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson blasted the court's decision to upend its default procedures and facilitate Louisiana's midstream redistricting rush, despite primary ballots having already gone out to military and overseas voters. Normally, the court frowns upon last-minute changes to election procedures, but in this case, it, quote, dives into the fray in a way that's, quote, unwarranted and unwise. She wrote, basically, she's upset that the Supreme Court is allowing Louisiana to go ahead and move forward with this, okay, because clearly she's rooting for Democrats, right?
Yeah.
So Justice Alito,
I mean, that's really what her problem is. It's one where if this were Democrats who were asking for some sort of rapid response to Democrat policy, she'd have no problem with it. She'd gladly pass it. Because it's helping Republicans, it's not good if we can't pass it.
Clap back at Ketanji Brown Jackson over her little tantrum here. In a concurring decision, Alito fumed that Jackson's dissent had accused the majority of, quote, an unprincipled use of power, which he claimed was, quote, baseless and insulting, as well as, quote, a groundless and utterly irresponsible charge. Quote, the dissent accuses the court of unshackling itself from constraints. It is the dissent's rhetoric that lacks restraint. He fumed. Yeah, I agree with that. her rhetoric is what lacks restraint, right? This woman cannot help herself. She's a liberal activist, just like the rest of the lower court judges. And, that's currently where we're at, right? This is why she's upset. Keep in mind that this was an 8-1 decision. So she was the lone dissenter. Even her other liberal colleagues agreed with the conservatives on this specific ruling. And she's the only one saying, nah, this ain't right, right? That's how stupid she is. This is how dumb she is. I'm so serious. Justice Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch signed to the concurrence in her dissent. Jackson pointed out that the court had waived the 32-day rule just twice in the last 25 years. Quote, the court's decision to buck our usual practice is tantamount.
See, but they can do it. So why are you getting mad about the fact that they're doing something that they're allowed to do? This is the gerrymandering argument. You gerrymander your states, and even though you say that it's bad and you would happily get rid of it, you don't not use it. So when you do it, it's fine, but when they do it, it's a problem. Okay, so just
to an approval of Louisiana's rush to pause the ongoing election in order to pass a new map, she wrote. Yeah. So you see that, you heard that. She's upset. And you have the Louisiana Black Caucus. They're currently upset as well, too, right? They're losing their minds over the Supreme Court allowing Louisiana to move forward with this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
A group of state lawmakers worry that recent measures are targeting black elected officials in Louisiana, especially New Orleans.
Andres Fuentes speaks with political experts who say Governor Landry might very well prevail in this fight.
The Louisiana Black Legislative Caucus rallied together Monday, outraged over Governor Jeff Landry's decision to pause congressional elections until a new congressional map can be drawn.
The issue today is whether or not a person who looks like me will have an opportunity to serve in Congress.
Well, the answer to that question is, yeah, if white Democrats are willing to vote.
Well, yeah. Well, not even, see, because it doesn't even have to be Democrats. What is stopping black people from running on the Republican ticket?
Vote for black Democrats, then this is not a problem, right? This is not an issue. And see, that's the part about this that's just so funny to me. These people boohoo whine and crown racism, but they really need to be boohoo whine and crown racism towards Democrats, right? White Democrats, not Republicans, because the only reason why this is an issue is because, as admitted to by the lawyers for Democrats in court, white Democrats tend to not vote for black people, right? Most black people vote Democrat. Most black people do not vote Republican. This is not...
Okay, but so most white people vote Republican. That doesn't mean that all of them do. Most black people vote Democrat. That doesn't mean all of them do. That's an unfair characterization.
A Republican issue because there's not a lot of
It's not being drawn based on party lines. It's being drawn based on skin color. Skin color and assuming the party affiliation of the individual based on their skin color.
Black Republicans running because a lot of black people are not Republicans.
The only reason that blue area was even on the map is because it was black people. Not because it was actually Democrats, but because it was black people.
Not really a Republican issue because black people don't support Republicans, right? For the most part. But black people heavily support Democrats, and in Democrat districts that just so happen to be more white-leaning, for whatever reason, it's harder for black people to win, right? Without having a majority black district. Again, that says a whole lot about white...
Well, it doesn't even have to do with winning, and it has to do with their voices being represented. How are their voices different from other voices? There was a person, and they were like, you realize that, like, things that would help black people, the legislation that would help black people, would help everyone, right? Then why do you make it a black issue? If the things that would help black people would help everyone, then why be exclusive? Say that you're doing it for everyone, instead of just doing it for black people. They can't or they won't.
Democrats, right?
I don't know which it is.
There's a whole lot about them and not really that much about white Republicans. And that's the part about this that I find to be so funny. They're literally complaining about racism, but the racism that they really should be complaining about is the racism coming from Democrats, right? Because white Democrats are the problem. That's the real issue. Also, on top of that, the issue is that black people vote for Democrats at such a high rate, right? 80, 90%. That's why this is a problem. This wouldn't be an issue. This would not matter at all in regards to black representation in Congress if black people did not vote for Democrats at 80 to 90%. If it was 50-50, this wouldn't be a problem. This wouldn't be an issue. This would not be a problem at all. So
no, it disenfranchises black voters who aren't Democrat. Their voices aren't being heard, even though they're black. And yet they're lumped into a Democrat district. That's not fair. That's not any more or less fair than Democrats being shoved into Republican districts where they also aren't being represented. Like,
honest to be so funny.
It goes both ways.
A vast majority of their complaints should be directed towards Democrats.
The governor's move came after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled Louisiana's current map with 2 majority black districts is unconstitutional, since race was a factor in its formation. The election pause, coupled with bills to eliminate black elected officials like Orleans Parish Criminal Court Clerk Calvin Duncan, caused outrage among caucus leaders.
They wasn't satisfied with Judge Gravelly here in the Middle District of what he did last night, so they went to the Fifth Circuit to get that overturned. Now they're trying to remove black judges in New Orleans as well.
With the caucus supporting court battles against the measures, political analysts say,
wasn't there another state where they were getting rid of a whole bunch of judges, and their whole rationale was they were consolidating, so they were just closing it down? This is not a race problem. This is a government function.
It could be an uphill battle.
Proving blatant racism in court is always very difficult.
Dillard University political analyst Dr. Robert Collins says, per the Supreme Court ruling, states are allowed to create congressional maps based on party, meaning the governor could be justified in approving maps that eliminate black majority districts if it benefits his party.
The Republican supermajority in the state legislature wants to send more.
How about Republicans and Democrats get together and draw a map that they can agree on?
Or Republican
No, that's asking too much.
As for the measures against the Orleans Parish Criminal Court Clerk and the criminal court judges, Loyola law professor Dane Cialino says GOP lawmakers could get a win in those cases too.
It's somewhat surprising that there have not been institutional changes in the court system for this long.
Cialino says it's difficult to argue against the legislation when supporters cite New Orleans' need to downsize.
There is a rational basis in population decline.
What did I say? What have I been saying the whole time? The redistricting needs to happen. Populations have shifted. People have left. People have come. It's different. Representation needs to be different.
In uniformity across the state, that I think it would be a difficult case to prove some sort of intentional race-based discrimination.
Now, we did reach out to Governor Jeff Landry's office for a response to the Legislative Black Caucus's comment, but we did not hear back.
Yeah.
Typical.
So, you see that, you heard that. Now,
because this is what happens. They get the information from a secondary source, and then they immediately follow it up with, well, we tried to ask the primary source, and they didn't have anything to comment about it.
Again, what is the problem?
Okay.
The problem is that Democrats decided it would be a good idea to draw maps based off race in the first place, and to do so explicitly. The reason why this is a problem is because they
Well, really, the problem is that the maps are partisan when they should be bipartisan. One single individual party should not be deciding the districts. That's how this happens. Both sides of the political spectrum, all sides of the political spectrum, should be coming together to decide maps together that fairly represent everyone. That's not what's happening. It is maximum warfare all the time, everywhere. Congratulations.
Say, hey, we're
That's what
drawing
this looks
map
like.
based off race, aka based off race that benefits the Democrats, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have any seats without these race-based maps. Okay, they would have no seats. They would have no power. So they use race as their.
Would they? If they exist, then they need some representation.
Justification. Supreme Court says you can't do that, and now they're shocked Pikachu face, right? That Republicans are saying, okay, no more race-based maps, right? We got to change the maps. Well, you shouldn't have drew the maps based on race in the first place, right? Maybe that's not how you should have designed the map. If you didn't design the map that way, then again, that wouldn't be a problem. This wouldn't be an issue. But, you know, this is something that they forced, and now they are, you know, paying the price. It is what it is.
No, because the one guy said it. Force has nothing to do with it. Redistricting is a natural function of government. Redistricting is supposed to happen. Doing it along partisan lines is not appropriate. Using it inappropriately in ways that it wasn't designed to be used is wrong.
This is a
The process isn't wrong.
As I've stated before, and I'll say it again, Democrats are the same party that they used to be back during slavery, back during Jim Crow, right? The illegal immigrants are the modern day slaves, and they still believe in segregation, right? Apparently, that's what they believe in. That's what they're showing you. Again, it's nothing different. The ideology is the same. It's the same underlining core ideology. They just pretend as if they believe in the exact opposite. But when you pay attention to what they actually do, right?
Because they virtue signal. They don't say what they actually think or what the plan actually is. They tell you what the correct position should be.
And what they support. Again, this
Meanwhile, not actually living up to or following that standard. Like racism. Excellent example. They say that the point is to get rid of all racism. But their solution to racism is racism. So you can never get rid of racism, because if you ever encounter racism, then you will have to act in racist ways in order to combat it. Not only do you have to never get rid of race, but you have to hold racism so thoroughly to yourself that you yourself become a racist. You just have to be able to flip it on and off. If you propose to get rid of violence, but how you get rid of violence is you engage in violence, then every time violence presents itself, you have to engage in violence. You will never be rid of violence, because as long as there's a potential that violence can appear, then you will have to be violent. You will always have to be violent. Racism works the same way. If you have to fight racism with racism, then you will always be racist. You will always have to live with some amount of racism in you so that you can unleash that racism when you encounter racism.
Change. This party hasn't flipped, right? This is what they tell people. Well,
It doesn't go away. It doesn't stop just because you think that it's mean or it's inappropriate. Especially if you think that that's the only way to combat it.
The Democrats have just gotten more sneaky about it, right? The marketing has changed, right? But the core ideology is still the same. Jim Crow, segregation, and slavery. They love it. They love it. It's just a modern day version of it, right? That's all it is. And they disguise it as social justice, right? So, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.
Well, because that's not unity, is it? If you take your group and you isolate it from the whole, that's not unity. That's exclusion. That's removing yourself from the group. So if they aren't asking for segregation, if they aren't asking for isolation, if they aren't asking for their own sectioned off space, then what are they asking for?